we'll get started. Everybody comes. Welcome.
I'm drifting towards it.
Okay, perfect. I'll give a quick introduction and then let these fabulous women get started. Thank you all for coming, really appreciate it. We're here tonight at Sophie White to celebrate the U.S. release of Where I End. Sophie White is a novelist, essayist, and podcaster from Dublin. She is the author of 7 books and has previously held the position of writer-in-residence in both Dublin City University and the Museum of Literature, Ireland. Her 5th book, the best-selling memoir Corpsing, was shortlisted for an Irish Book Award and the Michel Déon Prize for Nonfiction. Where I End is her 6th book and won the Shirley Jackson Award for Best Novel. She co-hosts the chart-topping comedy podcast The Creep Dive and writes the Substack Death is Coming.
I am fun.
And with her tonight is our just lovely Laura Sims, who's such a champion of our store. Laura is the author of How Can I Help You? A New York Times Publishers Weekly, Book Riot, and Crime Reads Best Book of the Year. Her first novel, Looker, made the best book list in Vogue, People Magazine, Real Simple, Entertainment Weekly, and more, and is now in development for television. An award-winning poet, Sims has published 4 poetry collections. Her essays and poems have appeared in the New Republic, Boston Review, Lit Hub, and Electric Lit. She and her family live in New Jersey, where she works part-time as a children's librarian. So, and they'll talk for a while, and you can ask some questions, and they'll be happy to sign some books after. Thank you so much, Catherine. You're welcome.
So great to be here with Sophie. I completely inhaled this book. I absolutely adored it. Not just saying that because she's here. I swear. You have to say it, but I'm telling you.
This isn't typed up feedback, no? 2 pages, both sides feedback. Let's go.
No, I absolutely loved it. It is like a dark dream that I just sank into. I mean, Corey was with me. As
I vouch. She really did
reading
vouch.
it.
Yeah, thank you.
I always just was looking forward to getting back to it while I was reading it. And so I'm super excited to talk to you about it. Do you want to read from it at all? Or?
Yeah, sure.
You don't have to. I just didn't know if you want to.
No, I'd love to. Yeah.
I
That'd be great. Thank you. In that
I
lovely
know, we want to hear that.
Exactly. You want to hear me botch the Irish as well?
We wouldn't know.
That's ideal, isn't it? Let me see there. There's a part that I usually read. This is a part of the novel that sort of describes the island where it's set. So with Where I End, the island came first of the whole story, really. And it's based on an island called Inishmaan that's off the west coast of Ireland. And because the book is just such a horrible little book, I actually can't go back to that island because I have genuinely, I think, alienated those people. And they were really kind to me when I went there in 2021 for research. They loved me. They added me to the swimming WhatsApp group, so I just went swimming with all the guys every day. And then I did this. So it's a real shame. But I really wanted the island, like, that inspired the book to, like, be a real kind of entity in the book. And so I will just read a little bit about the island. Witness the island. Witness it. At this point in summer on the island, the night comes at close to midnight. The darkness draws over at speed when it finally decides to. As dark as the sky is, the island is darker. Once the sky is dark, it's revealed as actually an absence, a black hole. But the island is a material darkness, a solid mass of dark. Derricka. The islanders use this word for all kinds of darkness. Muddy gloom and deep voids. They call the bottom of the sea on Crinel Hurrica, the dark bed. The island is dark, but the sea is dark too. though it is made of something else entirely. It is silky, and each undulation and ripple is edged in what little shy lustre can be drawn down from the endless sky hole above. The sea is dead, gilded with the dead light of dead stars, and because it sways and sings and chants, it feels alive, although it is not. It is teeming with death, and it is very, very beautiful. At the base of the cliffs at the west end, it licks and laps down under the island's hulk. At the east end, it rolls up onto the beach, like a lover ready to be taken. The sea is death reanimated. Down under the shimmying surface, the currents conduct the corpses, and they sway in a dance ringed around the island's underbelly. The islanders are doomed passengers. Their homes like mollusks clinging to the stone deck of the island. It is also precarious. 134 fleshy hearts beat inside fleshy bodies, inside toppling stone dwellings, all at the mercy of this dead and angry thing. The smallest heart on the island is the size of a walnut, and it belongs to Rachel's baby. To end its delicate throb, you would need only a pinch of a thumb and forefinger, a firm press to pop it like a berry. Every scrap of life on this island is fighting hard in its own little struggle. It seems useless to even try in this hateful place. The thing in the bed may even have the right idea, to succumb, to beg to be ended. The thing in the bed is maybe privy to something, or perhaps is just more willing than the others to face what this place is capable of. The others know, but they turn away from this knowledge. Out loud they call them accidents, out loud they call them bad luck. The island records are untrustworthy things, as the museum curators are learning. All that's known for absolute certainty is that no census taker came until 1931. I'll just skip forward a tiny bit to the report from the census taker, and then I'll just leave it at that. So, the mainlanders hated the island. By the time the first census was recorded, the mainlanders had settled on a ho-hum aversion. The islanders were ugly, they were poor, their Irish was incomprehensible. In spring of 1931, the island was home to 187 souls, about 10 families, all fishing and living a Spartan existence. The following year, when the man from the department returned to check some details, he found the population had dropped abruptly to 166, 21 people unaccounted for. When the islanders were unforthcoming, the census taker took the matter to mainland authorities, and they made the trip to investigate. The note taker recorded a little of what went on during the questioning. The island seems to be some kind of Brat Gaeltacht, but what's spoken there is a dialect barely related to Irish. Those we did understand seemed unperturbed by what appears to have been a mass death of 21 people since March of 1931. We were brought to the island's rudimentary cemetery, located on the island's high exposed northeast side, sea-marked map on file. The practices around burial are unusual. We are told by Rhiannoch, girl about 17, that they cannot dig the island. At its deepest, the soil layer is barely a forearm's length, hence their solution. Island children play in the area and appear unfazed by the macabre spectacle to be found there. Rhiannoch intimates that the island suffers losses of this scale frequently due to the dangerous nature of fishing the waters. When it was pointed out that if this were the case, the island's population would have died out long ago, the girls ceased to cooperate. Some of the missing appear to correspond to graves, and testimony from islanders claimed to be surviving family would seem to corroborate this. However, there are at least 7 others entirely unaccounted for. Inconsistencies in the record may be at fault, but even with some error or doubling up, we're still looking for the bodies of at least 5 people, some of whom appear to be members of the same family. When this is put to the group, one elderly man, 60s to 70s approx, answered, "If a man goes and chooses to take his clan with him, what do we do?" So it would appear that some migration takes place in the community.
You can see from that why she can't go back. tell everyone just a quick little, like, what the book is? And I would love to hear you talk too about the origin of the novel.
Sure.
Where it came from.
Yeah, so as you all know now, it's set on an island that is remote, and it is a novel about a family that live on that island, and the family are kind of like an island unto themselves. They are completely ostracized from the community on their island, so they're almost, an island within an island. And the family is Elin, who is the main character of Where I End, and she is in her late teens, and her mother, who is entirely bedbound, who Elin must care for, and Elin's grandmother, Maury. So it's 3 generations of women in this house, and Elin does have a father. He lives on the mainland, and he does come in and out of the story somewhat, but really it falls to Maury and Elin to look after Elin's mother, who she calls the bed thing. And basically Elin's never known her mother to speak or respond or really move. They must do everything for her, bathe her and feed her and change her, and Elin's really just kind of never had a mother really at all, and it's never really been explained to her what's wrong with her mother and what's wrong with their house. And it's really the novel kind of really begins when Elin becomes really taken with this young mother called Rachel, who moves to the island with her baby, and Rachel's an artist, and it's kind of Elin's first time seeing a mother and what a mother does up close, and it sort of starts to kind of just throw into stark relief kind of the sort of deprivation of her own life. And so, like I said, the kind of story began with the island in a way. I went to Inishmaan on my honeymoon, in 2012, so 10 years before I really started working on the novel, I think, and so obviously a bit more now. And it is such a mad place, Inishmaan. Do you know, is anyone familiar with the islands of the west coast of Ireland? They're called the Aran Islands, and there's 3, and they're kind of in a sheer, very small, Inishmaan, the middle one, and Aranmore is the kind of most populated, most kind of normal of the 3. And then if you've heard of Aran jumpers, they come from the Aran Islands, and they are big, heavy knitted gansies that the fishermen wore, and traditionally, and now they're sent all over the world, and they cost a fortune. And the island is just this crazy place, just even geographically. It has this kind of almost tropical beach at one end, white sand and really clear water, and then it kind of pitches up, really kind of a severe angle, almost like a kind of a tooth or something, and up to these high cliffs that then absolutely fall straight away off the back of the island. And the kind of people who live there live on this really small, tiny little stretch of it. The whole back of the island is completely deserted and unpopulated, and it's limestone. So it's a rock, basically. There is kind of some scrubby fields, all right, and they can kind of, they sort of have some animals grazing, but it's not, in this, it's not really soil that you can grow. And Inishmaan's a funny island because it's hypnotized generations of Irish writers. It's a very kind of prominent place in kind of Irish literature. So and so me and my husband went there, and we were having a really nice time until we went for a walk. And a walk just wrecks everything. And basically we went walking out the back of the island over these cliffs, and my husband got completely fucking spooked. And he I'm the freaking spook show, among us, you know what I mean? So it was very unusual, that he would get really, the whole place started to really get to him, and he really wanted to go back. And it was,
And where did you feel with the same way too?
Totally, yeah. But I mean, I would be expecting me to feel that way. Like I'm mentally ill and have been for years, so it seems way more normal to me when things are strange, you know. Like, so we went back, and I was really interested in this kind of way that this place seemed to be kind of haunting even a kind of quite rational person like him, and and then it was kind of, it's funny how the setting stayed with me over the next 10 years, and then like events in my own life kind of started to feed this story, kind of really like without me being very conscious of it. But basically, my father got really sick, and he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when he was like 52, I think it was. And so he has the distinction of being very young to have it. And I mean, if you're going to have a horrible illness, like, it's kind of nice to have an exotic version of it almost. Like, Alzheimer's, I'm 50, I can't believe it. And so his illness, like, went on for about 10 years, and he, for the last kind of 3 years of his life, was in a bed, completely unresponsive, you know, exactly like Elon's mother in the book. And so when you have someone in your life who's like really sick, and really sick for ages, it's so, like, it becomes really weirdly kind of mundane, the illness, even though it's like there's a horror there. Like, even, you know, his face and everything became so altered, you know, but you kind of stop being able to see it or something. You know, if anyone's really like lived with illness, it's kind of weird how the kind of goalposts of the illness shift all the time, and you just kind of accept it, and you kind of, even like I go and visit him, and like he wouldn't be able to make eye contact, or it was kind of different. There was like kind of different phases of his illness. So like, you know, he still lived at home with my mum, and he had like a psychotic episode, but we didn't realize it was a psychotic episode because it was all like mingled in with the fact that he had Alzheimer's. So like, that's very hard to unpick. And so unfortunately, we kind of didn't realize that there was something more going on until he like attacked my mom. Which was like, just, I don't know, I think everyone's like, don't Google it, you know, when you're like, get sick yourself or somebody in your life, and everyone's like, don't Google it. I'm like, Google it. Because I didn't Google Alzheimer's, and early onset has a kind of a connection with psychosis. So like, anyway, it was just mad. And so after that, he couldn't live at home anymore. But we used to go and visit him, obviously, all the time where he lived, in a kind of a hospice. And I used to bring, like, one of my kids I used to bring up there, and it was at the point where my dad was still able to sit up in a chair, but he kind of didn't really like know what was going on. But I do remember one day, he like, I don't know what he was seeing, because sometimes he was seeing things that weren't there, and he gave my son like a kick. My son was on the ground playing with toys, and my dad gave him this really dismissive little kick as if like he was in his way or something. And my toddler had like never even like probably been shouted at in his life, and was like, oh my God, and he was like so affronted at getting this like tiny little tap, like he was grand. But anyway, sorry, I'm going on, but me and my dad had a really, really, really good relationship. Like, he showed me Texas Chainsaw Massacre when I was 9 years old, and he was like, you have to watch this now. This is a classic of the genre. You're going to love it. And then he put it on and fell asleep, and I was sitting there like, and then, so he totally gave me my love of horror and everything. And when he started to go, I got really interested in this idea of like, what if this was the only type of parent you'd ever experienced? A person in the bed who couldn't look at you, or, you know. Sorry, what a time to start choking.
And you do a great job of that in the novel, of capturing like the everydayness of like Aileen has Aileen, right? Elin.
No, that's okay.
I screwed up.
No, it's
Elin.
Aileen is also an Irish name. So just to be annoying,
Okay.
I gave her a very irritating Irish name.
So Elin is like, yeah, she's never known anything different. And you do such a beautiful job of capturing just like her, I don't know, her indifference to her mother's situation.
Yeah. It's like almost not even quite callous. It's
No.
like less than callous.
Yeah.
They're very like, this woman in the bed is an object to
Yeah.
be dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like everyone who knows illness knows that like illness is just like beating back this tide of decay like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I got really like sitting by my dad's bed those last few years, I got really interested in the idea of like what child would a situation like this produce,
Right.
you know? And then I also, in those kind of intervening years, and this was like long before I started planning the novel or writing it, and I was writing other books at the time, rom-coms are my other work, so always trying to be as deranged as possible, really. And the other thing that had happened in those years in my life was having kids myself, and like I mentioned, I'm bipolar, and I had my first episode, like my first breakdown, I guess, and first, you know, psychiatric hospital admission, when I was 22, and like, oh my god, like nothing ever hits like the first one does, especially in 2007, where like nobody was talking on social media about their like their, you know, head meds and you know, anything, their intrusive thoughts or anything like that. And I even wasn't diagnosed as bipolar until I was in my 30s. The first breakdown, I now really liked drugs a bit too much when I was in college. And I am the absolute cautionary tale because I just had drug-induced psychosis is what they called it. So that was so much fun. And so when I had kids, I kind of thought it might be a bit irresponsible of me to have kids. I hadn't really kind of made up my mind about having kids, and then I got pregnant by accident. And then it's kind of weird, like sometimes that can kind of clarify things a little bit. It's almost easier, I think. So I had a kid and like obviously lost my mind, and also just like became really terrified of the level of like, you know, just influence and control and, you know, that you have over this child when you have a child. Is like, it's just a terrifying thing where like you are this child's universe, you know, and like that universe can be great or it can be terrible, and yeah.
And do you think that's why this is a horror novel? I mean, it really is a novel about motherhood and daughterhood and everything. And I feel like a lot of people are exploring that now, but this really stood out, I think, from the crowd. Like, it's really intense, and it is a horror novel, and like about motherhood.
So much horror is about mothers.
Yes,
isn't
that's
it?
true.
Like
That's
there's
true.
such a kind of like the core villain in so many ways. Like even in like Friday the 13th, it's originally the mom, isn't it?
Oh,
Jason
to remember.
And Rosemary's Baby.
And
Rosemary's Baby.
Psycho.
The mother is the victim.
Yeah, and completely like Carrie, like
all film.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about it.
it's just like they're always kind of monstrous mothers. You know, it's kind of, I think it's because it's like the biggest like transgression we can conceive of is a woman kind of like not kind of, you know, obeying the social contract. You know, like, you know, if like a woman leaves her children, it's just like so like unbelievable. And like poor dads, like it's actually quite insulting for men that people are like, oh yeah, he's left. You know? Like, and I'm like, that's shit, because men are great, and like, you know, hashtag
Good
not
to
women.
have that.
But but if a woman does it, it's like, oh my god, like to be selfish, you know, as a mother is just like really, like people don't know how to deal with it at all. And like, funny enough, like this, so because again, like I have very different strands to my work, so I work with 2 different publishers in Ireland, and that actually really helps because some part of my work is kind of like more on this kind of literary, dark sort of side, and then the rom-coms are like over there, and they're all like pink and yellow and green and like fun, and they're fun to write, and I love them. But with this original publisher of Where I End, I had brought out a book of non-fiction essays with them, called Corpsing, My Body and Other Horror Shows. And I feel like that was my first kind of foray into horror, was writing this kind of non-fiction work, which was kind of like possibly like a little bit of, or I don't know, it's just kind of, I guess, well, I do remember the Sunday Times in the UK called it a joyride through misery. But it was a lot about grief, and it was a lot about illness and mental illness and motherhood and things like that. And so the kind of reading I was doing around sort of like non-fiction reading at the time definitely really inspired where I am as well, because I was reading things like Deborah Leavy's The Cost of Living, Rachel Cusk, A Life's Work, that like is still such a kind of a landmark book that people did not know what the fuck to do with when she wrote it, because it came out in about 2004, I think, and it was about feeling ambivalent towards motherhood, and like she was eviscerated, especially by the UK media, are just, they're absolute twats, like they're absolute fucks when it comes to shit like that. And even like, it's still such a kind of, like, motherhood's such a performance now in like our kind of age of, so it's really interesting how motherhood just keeps shape-shifting and keeps continuing to be the impossible state. You know, like there's no way to do it that is going to ever like feel like enough.
Right.
Yeah. So I take to the bed and don't talk to your kids and make them change you and turn you.
See what happens.
Yeah.
See what you make.
See what you make of it. No.
I'm so fascinated that you write these rom-coms as well as books like this. I just wonder, do you think about genre when you're writing, or is it just like, oh, well, this is coming out and whatever this is?
I kind of do. Like when I kind of get going on an idea for a novel, I will know where it's going to sit, definitely. Yeah. And I tend to write them all kind of at the same time, so I'm usually kind of toggling between one and the other, so one will be in first draft, one will be in edits or something like that. So like the books I wrote at the same time as that are like so bizarre, like just in terms of, you know, I don't know, I was writing one about social media influencers and all of the lunacy of that life, which was obviously like verging on farce, like, you know, that was a novel where I kept trying to come up with like mad shit for the influencers to do, and I'd come up with a character called, her handle was Cancer Kelly, and she was like, she was faking cancer for the gram, and then Belle Gibson, the Australian wellness blogger, faked cancer for the gram. So every scenario I came up with, I was like, this is off the wall. No one would believe this. And then I'll be like, oh shit. There's some other nanny with a fake GoFundMe pretending the kid she's minding is her child with a terminal illness. And then it's like, oh, so annoying. But so different kinds of research involved.
Yes. Do you do a lot of research?
I do. I mean, only insofar as I'm enjoying it. Like, I was never good at homework at school or anything. But the research for this is killer.
For the island, you did a lot in the island? Yeah.
Like, I went to the island, I did a lot of like, so my background's in fine art, so I did a lot of like making drawings and making video and things like that, but like all for my own use, like just to kind of like try and really bring it to life. And it's also amazing what you know you could never really come up with yourself, you know, that's kind of presented to you when you do research, you know, which is so cool. So like so much of the details that are kind of folk horror elements of the novel are really true. Like, so one of the things described in the book is how, like, when you drown, I suppose particularly in kind of like freezing waters like the Atlantic off the west coast of Ireland, you know, well, sometimes your body can go like really hard, like waxy, and it's like this weird phenomenon. It doesn't happen that often, and it happens if the body has like a lot of fat, like babies do. Isn't that really creepy? So you can, when they come out, and then other times the like flesh just kind of sloughs off the skeleton, you know, that kind of way. And so you know the jumpers I was telling you about, the iron, the Ganseys, and so they're very thick wool, and like it's really funny that the fishermen use it, and it is like insulating, but But also, if you go in the water, it then becomes like your tomb because it's heavy, you know,
Oh.
and it's going to be, you're fighting for your life in this fucking jumper that your mum made. And when the bodies like come out
Intentionally,
sometimes,
to kill you, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
payback for the colic. And do you call it colic here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the jumpers, when the bodies come in, they used to sometimes be very hard to identify because they'd been in water for too long and things like that. And so what they do, or used to do on the west coast of Ireland with these Gandhis, is that they would make, they're all cable and ribbed cuffs and things like that, and they would deliberately make a mistake in either the kind of cable or the ribbing to identify their own dead. So like different families had their own like twist of wool they might do, or isn't that cool? Like you could never think that up.
No.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's
I'm obsessed with this because I'm really into knitting myself. Yeah. So that kind of research, like you can't, like, it's just so fun as well.
Right.
Yeah. But then other research I found quite tough on the old stuff because I write a lot in the mornings, and I'd often, so it'd be like on an empty stomach from like 6 to 8. That's a bit of an agreement I have with my husband, that like he'll bring me up coffee and he kind of starts all the kind of, you know, shit show with 3 boys under 10. And I'd be like, tippy tappy, tippy tappy. And then like I need to like describe what it looks like with bone exposed out of a hand. Then I have to like Google image search bone exposed out of a hand, and like I'd be there the whole time. By the way, we need to do this, but also compelled to.
I was afraid to read this when I knew it was going to be body horror. I tend to avoid body horror.
That's
like,
interesting.
As sick and twisted as I am, I don't love like the gory stuff, but
That's interesting because so I'm obviously reading How May I Help You? How Can I Help You?
Yeah.
And it's absolutely brilliant. But I was just last night reading this scene in the book where do you know what I'm about to describe?
So good.
Where one of the protagonists like lies down with this woman. Yeah. Oh, it's such a good scene. But the woman's kind of like dying, like really close to death. And the protagonist like is just like consumed by wanting to be as close as possible and kind of like,
I guess that
it's
is kind
disgusting
of
because like you describe it in a bathroom and you describe the stench in the room because obviously
Public
the woman
bathroom.
has like lost control of her bowels and things like that is what I took that to be. And then oh my god, it's just like this whole sensory nightmare, you know?
Yeah.
But I love gore. Like I ate
You
that.
started with good. I'm so
Oh,
glad.
God.
I forgot, like blocked it out that I'd even written that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in necrophiliacs. Like, I cannot get enough of them. Like, what is going on? Do you know? Are you into necrophiliacs?
I mean, that character comes close.
Yeah.
Very close. Yeah, it's fascinating. Any kind of abnormal psychology, I'm
You're there.
really there.
You're there, yeah.
There for it.
The, I can't remember what I was doing when I was researching all these necrophiliacs. I think it was actually the book of essays.
That makes sense.
I remember why. I was writing an essay about pregnancy cravings. And in one of my pregnancies, I got this mad craving for blood. I just had this idea in my head, just became fixated on it, that this was the thing I wanted. And it was such an unfortunate craving. Like, in terms of trying to satisfy that. Like, I was on Instagram and I was like, trying to kind of just like bring the idea out kind of just casually between stories and see if there was like a dodgy phlebotomist or something. But the mad thing was I was really actually, when it kind of got down to it, I really actually just wanted the blood of like friends, like people I knew, like, and it was really interesting how there was like among my friendship group, there was like people I definitely wanted and people I did not want. And it was like, it's
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and they were all women, and I think that's because I'm like straight partnered bisexual. So like said, my husband was like, oh yeah, well, I guess has to come out somewhere, doesn't it? And I'm like, just women's blood. And yeah, I kind of got into this idea around like the kind of ultimate off the menu desire. Necrophiliacs.
Yeah.
Nobody's thinking of the poor necrophiliacs.
It's true. Here's their TV show.
Yeah.
Well, if you do write about it, I would say that an unfortunate craving is a brilliant title for whatever you're going to do.
Oh, that would be good. It
Ooh.
was
Oh,
called
yeah.
Craving,
I like
not
the
Unfortunate,
dodgy
but that's really
phlebotomist.
good.
I
Dodgy
like the dodgy
phlebotomist.
Yeah.
That's a series.
I know,
Totally.
oh my god, yeah.
Like, TikTok sensation, A Certain Hunger, that is about like cannibalism.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, blood.
Yeah.
I haven't read it.
When was that? 2019, that pregnancy. And the book that story is in came out kind of about a year later or so.
Yeah.
And it's one of the stories that like I definitely find if I go and meet people to talk about, I just can see them thinking of it while they're looking at me. I can just tell by a certain expression on their face because that essay, well, like I had extracts from a brilliant interview that an American writer did with a necrophiliac called, her name was Karen Greenleaf or something like that.
Okay.
And like, oh, the interview was fascinating.
Wow.
It's in a brilliant book called Apocalypse of Wow, I think is
Oh,
the name of the book, and it's a
heard of
kind of a
that.
cultural, it's essays on the culture,
Interesting.
it's really interesting,
Yeah.
and there's a whole one about her, which is so good.
Wow.
But the end of that essay that I wrote about that was it kind of went a bit, jumped the shark, I think is the phrase.
Yeah.
Went a bit off the rails, and I ended up getting like a big like 3-liter container of pig's blood off a butcher to see if that would scratch the itch.
Did it?
No, it was very watery.
Oh
I was expecting lush,
No legs.
viscous,
Kind of
like
the,
maple syrup.
kind of the film version
consistency.
of blood.
Exactly.
Like horror movie blood then.
Exactly. Yeah, this pig's blood. No, not good.
No, not good enough.
They're
Well,
really,
I'm
really
sure-
veered off topic.
I'm
Or
sure some of you might have questions. Somebody, please jump in. I have more questions for Sophie, but if you do
If
have
anyone
a
does,
question.
yeah.
Well, do you think you'd need that balance between the genres? Like, do you think you need the light and
Oh,
the
yeah.
darkness, or is it just something that comes more organically for you?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I think that I like the balance. I like the kind of spending time in different worlds. I think if it was like all this all the time, and yeah, I do think it would be a bit of a drag.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I like I really like chick lit. Like that's the kind of rom-com side. Like as a reader as well as writing it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's kind of. But I don't. If I had to pick, like that'd be hard. Like I wouldn't want one without the other. Really, I like
Mm.
them
And you do
Oh.
them like, you're not doing two kind of dark works at
At
the
the
same
same
time.
time.
You're
Yeah.
doing
exactly.
light and dark.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Well, I'm curious then to kind of leap off of that. Like, I think it was like Jordan Peele had a line where the line between horror and comedy is so thin
Totally.
because both kind of rely on tension and punchlines and
Mm.
reveals and turns. But hearing you describe these two simultaneous genres that you work in, have you ever thought of merging those two things to have some sort of horror rom-com or kind of or romantic horror? Yeah, like this is the age of the mashup. I mean,
Oh, I
as
know.
publicists, like I'm talking to people, I'm like, well, it could be a comedy. You could also market it as fantasy. You could also market it as romantasy.
Right.
Also, there's a spaceship. Like there's.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
hearing you talk about these two things, do you find it might be interesting or actually maybe not something you want to do to make a project kind of walking that tightrope? I don't know.
No, I'm really into it. Like that. I don't know if it's Jordan Peele's line, but that thing of like, good horror is amazing, and bad horror is just great comedy. Like, so you kind of nearly can't do bad horror because it's either going to be terrifying or really funny. But I've written a like comedy slasher short story that is really in the voice of my rom-com. Like, it just is a funny, like I just have a feeling of the voice, and this is like, it's really in that voice, but it's like about like really like middle class couples having a dinner party. And the people who are hosting the dinner party are really excited because they've just had their home renovated, because like they're in their 40s, so they have to have a huge home renovation. And there's nothing else in their lives and nothing else to talk about except the home renovations, and they're the last of their friends to do it. But they're really fucking excited because they've gotten onto one of these home interiors reality show things. So their house is going to be like displayed on this incredible home of the year show, and then a like slasher killer gay crashes the dinner party and like obviously starts killing everyone, but like is also like putting the bloody knife down on the onyx granite countertops, and like the hostess of the party is like losing her shit because he is like fucking shoots on in the house. So like, yeah, because I do really love, like, I mean, things like Scream and stuff. You know, I think Scream was one of the first kind of horror movies I even saw as a kid. Like, so I love that whole tone and stuff. And then in terms of like the horror romance, it's so funny that you should say it, because a publisher like that likes Where I End was like, are you working on anything else in that kind of vein? And I was like, I am. And they were like, it'd be brilliant if it was a horror romance. And I was like, oh, would it be brilliant? But I was like, I've never heard of anybody kind of seeking out that kind of genre, so thus far. But funnily enough, like the new horror novel that I'm writing has a couple. And it's all about that thing of like, you know, when people kill together, you always want to know like who started that conversation, like who floated it, the idea first, you know. So it's a little bit like about that.
Wow.
So it is romantic. Yeah, and messed up.
I love that you won the Shirley Jackson Award, and very deservedly. And it's funny, it's such a different book from my favorite Jackson novel, which is We Have Always Lived in the Castle. But there are these like parallels, you know, there's the isolated family, right?
Totally,
You don't know like the backstory, and the mean villagers, and then this new person who comes and like shakes things up. And I was wondering, is Jackson an influence for you?
Definitely. And Mary Cat, like very particularly. I was very inspired by the way that Mary Cat doesn't realize there's anything wrong with their situation. Like, and Elin is like that at the beginning of the novel. I really wanted to like have that. I think that kind of, when I'm making a book, I have like always a central question that like helps me kind of like stay in and around what I'm trying to do. So like the central question of that was like, you know, what kind of child would be produced by a parent in a bed? And then I read a lot around kind of just sort of like gathering inspiration, things like that. I know a lot of writers don't like to read in the genres they're writing, funny enough, because I think people are kind of anxious about kind of plagiarism by osmosis or something like that.
Right.
And maybe it's a huge problem in my work, I don't even realize, but I like reading a lot around the kind of thing that I'm aiming at. So I like read Shirley Jackson, I read We've Always Lived in the Castle, and I was very into the Tom Ripley, Patricia Highsmith books, because I really liked Ripley as a bit of a kind of model for Elin. And also the Yellow Wallpaper was a big one, which I think is probably pretty obvious as well. And then there was actually some plays, some Irish plays, because there's a thing in Ireland, I don't know, it's just evolved, where there's such a kind of trope of the mother in the bed, in particularly Irish theatre. And if anyone knows like the Beauty Queen of Lannan or any of those plays by Martin McDonagh, thank you. That trope is like very present in those plays as well, and things like that. So yeah, and then also Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a massive jumping off point from where I am.
Okay.
Because again, because it's like, it is a toxic family.
Right.
And like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a toxic family. And Leatherface is, to my mind, an abused child. I have spent so much time with that movie. I have thought more about that film than I'd say any person. I mean, I don't want to lay any claims here, but
Wow.
I just find it such a rich text. And
Yeah.
I do think that like Leatherface is given to us as an abused character, like particularly in the dinner party scene. I think that's where really the hierarchy of that family like really comes out. I don't know if anyone else like really liked Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Do you guys know? Has everyone seen
I
it?
never watched it.
You guys haven't seen it?
Too scared.
When it first came out.
Yeah.
it was
Years
dumb.
ago.
Yeah, what was that, 79?
I'm gonna go with whatever you get.
Yeah. That's amazing. I can't believe none of you have seen it. I mean, okay, well, sorry, but I mean,
I know.
like in a room full of people.
I'm
shocked.
But in our generation, it's like I was a little too young to see it when it came out.
Okay,
I was
yeah.
13 and then I never got back to it.
Okay.
It's like one of those things that, you know, now we should.
Escape.
I know we
certainly
should.
will.
I think
I
it's
was more,
really good.
as a living dead kind of obsessed. with it.
Yeah,
But that's a
yeah.
Well, I was
that's
the
good.
Omen,
Right.
Close.
a lot of Omen, a lot of
Cousin.
Rosemary
Sure.
Baby, a lot of occult. kind of,
Yeah.
That was the,
I'm like, oh, what's the deal? There's a new Omen, isn't there?
and there's a new Rosemary Baby.
Is there?
The girl who played Anna Daldy, Juliet, somebody.
Garner.
Garner, she's gonna be the
Mm.
new Rosemary. But then there's a new one.
I'm into the new Omen. I don't really, if they're just remaking Rosemary's Baby, I'm kind of not that bothered. So what they keep
Unless
doing
they're
that.
doing something
I
new.
think she's the
it's
neighbor
interesting.
who dies, who first jumps off the balcony.
Oh.
So it's a little bit of a spin
Oh, okay.
For the Omen.
for Rosemary's Baby.
Rosemary.
Oh, Rosemary's Baby. Oh, it's so funny because the nanny jumps off their house in the beginning of the Omen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that scene. It's so good. So good.
So you have myriad influences.
Yes. I know, I just, yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is just very,
Yeah. That's like
inspiring
rear window
fruit.
for me.
yeah,
I saw it when I was young, very young, with my dad, and just loved it. I think I've seen it like 100 times.
It's brilliant.
It's
But also, I feel like that makes really good sense, because like your novels are very literary and very, I would say, even though there's like so much like creepy, unsettling darkness, it's like kind of like very restrained and classy, like Hitchcock, and I'm like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like that is, but that's how, yeah, like that's really interesting that
Yeah.
Rear Window is a big one for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
so interesting. Wait, any?
Well, we should probably get to signing some books, unless
Okay.
anybody have any other questions.
Just, I wanna know about that tattoo now that I heard of the
Oh.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh yeah, I mean it actually looks like the house, doesn't it, in the film? But it's the cover of Corpsing, that book of essays.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
So it is a haunted house with the legs of a woman.
It looks like one of the Louise Bourgeois.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm obsessed with her. Yeah. She was my vibe in art school.
Oh.
Big style. Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you so
Sophie.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so